welcome you to our Idealspaces workshop on identity and place and belonging. It's a workshop on citizenship, space and community, and the relation of the citizen to a often discussed topic today, the danger, in fact, of losing a democracy and democratic values, and how all this relates to placemaking, and the citizen. I want to welcome you to this important theme, and we divided it into different topics. We is Jason Montgomery. He's from the Catholic University of America, Washington, D.C. He is a professor in urban planning, and we will be the main moderator. And we have Ettore Mazzola from Rome. Perhaps you can say a few short words about you.
I'm an architect in Rome. I've taught for 12 years at the University La Sapienza as assistant professor, and since 2001 I'm teaching urbanism, architecture and building techniques, traditional urbanism, architecture and building techniques at the University of Notre Dame School of Architecture.
Okay. I want to pass over to Jason.
So welcome as well, everyone. Very happy you're all here with us, and very honored to be helping moderate this event. So today we begin here at the Idealspaces Foundation a dialogue. This is very important at our current moment, when fragmentation and dysfunction are eroding societal bonds and undermining the possibility of legitimate authority. Ulrich, Grant, Ulrike, and the rest of the Idealspaces team have brought us here to probe, provoke, tease out new and old perspectives and theories that can move forward our thinking on citizenship, city, place, identity, and democracy. Ettore and I are very grateful to be here as guests of the Foundation to help sustain and nurture this dialogue. We thank our hosts for their hospitality. To help us do this, we ask all of you, all for your full participation in this dialogue. There's no hierarchy in this conversation, and everyone's voice is welcome. If you are online, you are encouraged to use the raise hand function, and I will let you know, although I believe we have no online yet, so we'll come back to that. And to get us started, I would like to briefly review some of the context and concepts that seem central to our task today and tomorrow. In a recent column by Thomas Edsel on democracy and social media, Professor Richard Pildes at New York University notes that, quote, "The challenge the communications revolution poses to democratic government is more profound than more familiar concerns with disinformation, misinformation, offensive speech, and the like. The revolution might inherently undermine the capacity for legitimate, broadly accepted political authority, the authority necessary to be able to govern effectively in democratic systems." End quote. Professor Pildes' reflection raises a question. How can democratic structures and processes survive societal fragmentation into camps of diametrically or polymetrically opposed information? Can place be an important aspect of any efforts to reweave social bonds? According to Western cultural heritage, where the idea of free citizenship and democracy originated, citizenship, place, and the city belong together. The idea of free citizenship and democracy is reflected in the understanding of the human being as a zoon politikon, literally translated as animal who lives in the polis, the city. It is a definition given by Aristotle, inhabitant of one of those ancient Greek cities where democracy was first practiced. To live in such conditions is civilized, in literal terms. The word civilization derives from the Latin civilius. It is that which belongs to the human being as a citizen, a word which city is reflected. The member of a formal community as a civis. and relates to political life. The civis, being the member of that formal community or civitas, has formal rights and obligations. From this etymology, we realize where our current understanding of formal or parliamentary democracies is rooted. Even dictatorships, in terms of material and technological achievements, may be called civilized, but they lack true citizenship and civility in the sense outlined here. In its essence, civilis denotes capabilities of political foresight and mutual assistance, enabling societies to form through association and organize themselves voluntarily. True civilization can be understood as mutual help, social cooperation, and civic engagement. Civitas can be seen as a space of co-liberation. A.M. Leon writes that civitas, quote, describes a social body of citizens bound by law, yet in that dry definition lies something more poetic, the dream that we are greater than the sum of our constituent parts. How can we, as citizens and as collective individuals, be more than we are alone? Unquote. Unquote. In the context of a social media environment and in the drive for profit and technological optimization, especially now in the form of AI, is it merely a utopian dream to see anything other than the continued fragmentation of our techno-civilization? We gather today and tomorrow to probe the condition we find ourselves in and explore conceptually the potential to reestablish civitas. This exploration may strive for a deeper understanding of the power of place in our social, economic, and political life. This exploration must address our human condition and the significance of social associations and bonds in different forms. This exploration must provoke thinking on identity in the 21st century and how it might be formed and maintained. This conceptual exploration may give us a glimpse of or image for the future of democracy in our society. The most critical question appears to be this: have we evolved as social creatures such that community through human contact is no longer essential to our well-being and meaningfulness of our existence? Alternatively, if we remain the social animal or zoon politikon, then perhaps we can posit that much of our current societal instability is in part a consequence of the undermining of place by social media. This workshop seeks to provoke critical discussion on what seems to be an evolving condition of the relationship between place and identity and citizenship and democratic space. The central premise of this workshop is that our, quote, classical understanding of connections between physical place, community, citizenship, and democracy has either become obsolete, is in the process of a cultural erosion and may become obsolete, or this erosion is a temporary phenomenon that cannot eliminate the basic human need for physical place and direct physical contact. This premise is posed to reassess the value or potential of the city as a place for democratic life in the 21st century. Notes and reflections generated by this dialogue will serve as the basis for a new special issue of Urban Ideas, the research journal founded in conjunction with the Idealspaces Foundation. The structure for today and tomorrow. Today, we will focus on place, identity, citizenship, and democracy. That will include probing the individual and society. It will include reflecting on inverses of communal to individual and individual to communal. Day 2, tomorrow, we will focus on community, democracy, space, and urban form. Ettore tomorrow will take us, start us off on that conversation. The major goal tomorrow will be to reassess the value or potential of the city as a place for democratic life. We have started now, and we will have a half-hour break in about a little over 2 hours, and then we will finish the conversation between 3 and 6 p.m. locally. So with that, I would like us to start.
Yeah, very good. Let's start.
So
probing the assumptions is an important point to start with, because we all rested in our Western cultural sphere. We all are resting and have been rested in certain basic assumptions about a human being, a so-called general human condition or conditio humana. And one of these essential assumptions was, as Jason already addressed, that by its essence, the human being is a zoon politica, which means an animal, a zoon, as also other animals are, but a specific animal. It's an animal that has a certain bios, a certain specific life in the polis, together with other animals. And the polis is the domain not only of the city itself, but also of the surroundings, the immediate, natural and cultivated surroundings of the city. As this recent dream of the green city was already present in the original Greek conception of the polis, in the synoikia, the cohabitation or living together. This is one aspect. The other aspect is it needs to become an active polites or civis, as the Romans said, an active citizen. You need a certain ethos. You need a certain basic attitude, and you need certain values and a certain kind of collective consciousness, outspoken or not, that you as a member of a community and as a member of a city, of a polis, willing active to participate in molding the fate of your polis. You belong to this polis. And as our friend, an Idealspaces Foundation friend, Massimo Venturi said, who unfortunately cannot come, he said, this ethos aspect is of crucial importance, because we have two different aspects of ethos. On the one hand, we have this ethos on a personal, individual level. I need a certain attitude, a certain basic will to participate. This is ethos. Ethos is also how I commonly use and behave in my life. The other ethos, this is ethos, this is related to the place. I can only be a citizen if I have a certain ethos, in the sense that I belong to a place together with others, and out of this specific way of belonging, the common good will result in our common activities being bounded to that place. And this is ethos. This is very important, because it is not only the base of our Western understanding of citizenship, it is also it's an intuitive approach. It's a holistic approach. As I need a personal ethos, a personal attitude, and there must be an ethos. So in my group, with my co-citizens, we need a place in a certain basic collective consciousness or basic understanding that we are here, we are belonging to this specific place, this is our place, in a non-exclusive manner. And out of this, the possibility of a true dialogue will emerge. Now, as citizens belonging as an ethos to a specific place, concrete place, we are able to enter into a dialogue with other citizens from other places. This is very important for the meaning of dialogue. And this was one of the humanist approaches from Protagoras. This was a Greek philosopher in Athens, who said the human being is the final measure of all things. And this was redetected in the Renaissance, and said also in terms of architecture, the human being is the measure of all things. And this is not an anthropocentric or arrogant way of looking at things. It relates to the place, to ethos, and to the common good. this very short is the basic background of understanding. And to conclude, we have the nomos, the law, which is not a Roman or our modern understanding of the law. It's a kind of behavior and not outspoken. This is the way we are doing the things here. And the nomos relates to the ethos. So far, so good. And this is relevant until today. So this is not some ancient stuff. People are behaving in this kind of categories, let's say, so until today. And every group does. So this is at the background. As regards our Western culture, the West has been the only cultural sphere that developed the idea of a free citizen. No other culture. This is important. And we are on the way in the West to throw this very and precious idea, to throw it away with both.
Thank you, Ulrich. The term place is one I think that we could all probe a bit further. So the idea of having attitude about yourself and your attitude connected to the concept of place. I think we have to work a little bit to define what we think we mean by place. Just so does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I think something to be taken in consideration as architects, as an urban designer, is the fact that whatever we do has an influence on the human being. It could be positive or negative. And the greater aim or goal of an urbanism must be the way we reinforce and develop the sense of belonging. If we design places that could be defined non-places as they have been defined, we destroy the social aspect of humans, that is a social animal. And the more we go forward, the more we are damaging this way of behaving. Someone, at the end they can accuse people that are talking about these things as people that are thinking that there is someone that is plotting somewhere, and so the conspiration, etc. But it's undeniable that we are living in a society that is too much based on consumerism applied to any aspect of life, including the way we are designing, we are sharing the spaces. They tend to break the relationship among humans instead of understanding the importance of working in community. The tragic event of the pandemic brought all over the world to develop and impose, now I'm talking about the case of Italy, the amount of economic investment made on technology, and all these things are always presented with the economical tragic claim attitude to introduce and present something in a super positive manner to do exactly the opposite. So the way, for instance, in after Second World War, in the US, more than all the other countries, it was celebrated the independence from public transportation, burning trams and the public transportation line, to be free to use the car, and then being kidnapped in a traffic jam. In reality, there is always something to be analyzed properly. And recently, with the pandemic, due to the needs of keeping distances, it was imposed this idea of working from remote, proposed as a good thing, because then you can have time for yourself, which on one hand could be something positive. On the other hand, is destroying social relationship. A lot of children started suffering of serious psychological problem with the lack of lack of relationship and having problem in engaging relationship with the others. So sometimes we have to understand that the fact that we are in the 21st century doesn't mean that we are to live in a hypothetical future, but sometimes we have to watch behind and see how our predecessors that were wiser than ours used to do. So I think in this moment is really time to think about the importance of promoting the community and going back to our attitude of being a social animal more than an antisocial.
So you posited like place and non-place. And in a way, I think I was pulling from the way you described that place could be defined through its social impact. Like in essence, we don't know if we have a place unless social interactions happening. So I'd love to hear more about everyone's thoughts on, when we prepared our program, our first question was, what is the significance of real places in anthropological terms? So, and how can we call something a place versus a non-place? What are the qualities? What is the definitional characteristic that we can define? So yes, focus on that. And I'll bring the microphone over to you.
Working? I'd like to ask every man on the panel, we talk about community, we talk about social entity. The community was a basis of identity in society over the probably years. The community and society were basic, if I could say, signposts of living every day. In addressing this, I'd like everybody's opinion on how technical things like the internet, which has become a new third world, it's become a new community, is really affecting what has been established to this point as community and society.
Well, est modus in rebus, the Latin used to say. Internet is a fantastic, democratic way to talk, to interact, but is also something that could be extremely dangerous on the other hand. Because if we use properly the media, the social media, we can do something that until a few years ago it was not possible. For instance, if we talk about the cities, if we talk about the places, if we talk about the way we can generate a sense of belonging and identity, today, thanks to the web and thanks to many social media and many podcasts, blogs, etc., when we talk about urbanism and architecture, we can talk in a very neutral and democratic way, while for decades and decades after, especially after Second World War, but mainly from the 60s of last century, it has been some kind of dictatorship made by what we defined wrongly modernism, because no one of the architects of the modernist movement used to use the word modernism because they were using the word functionalism, always because of what I said earlier. The problem was introduced in a very positive manner, saying that what it was proposed, it was more functional versus the dysfunctional historical city. And that is another things that needs a couple of days to be analyzed properly to see exactly what happened during the Siam of 1933 when this decision was taken. Today, thanks to the social media, thanks to the podcasts, there is the possibility to talk about many aspects of contemporary architecture, contemporary urbanism that is back respectful of the human being, that for many decades has not been possible. I was a student in Rome, which is an excellent school of architecture. In terms of theory, in terms of design, is a place for lobotomy. It's a place where students are obliged to do what the professor ideas are, and it was forbid to do anything that was respectful of places. And so it was proposed this kind of architecture that has been called international style, that is the murder of architecture, is the murder of place, is the murder of identity, to be unified under the umbrella of ugliness, which is a way to make people unhappy instead of being happy. When cities were created, we are always referring to Renaissance, but we are wrong in referring only to Renaissance, because if we have the fantastic phenomenon of Renaissance, is also because of what happened at least 2 centuries earlier and more, with the communal period, when after the feudal era, when family were fighting one each other within the same former cities, creating a little castle, fighting one each other with this tower. With the communal period, and we have to think about this not only in terms of urbanist architecture, but in terms of policy and in terms of what is happening today, because we are really borderline to the end of the empire, to the end of the feudal period, to the end of many kingdoms, because at the end, when the middle class is disappearing, there is the rebellion. There is a way to change the world, which was what happened in the 12th, 13th century, when the majority of people that were the traders understood that it was no longer possible to live under these terrible moments of family fighting one each other. And they took the power and they made these fantastic cities, which are those we love today, with this network of piazze and piazzette. And they also invented a name that could be absolutely important to be rediscovered today. Even if today, if you use this word in Italy, you are accused to be nationalist, because being proud of our places, now it is used as something that is wrong. I think we must be proud of our countries, of our cities, which doesn't mean to be racist with anyone. And the word was campanilismo. The campanilismo is to say the campanile, the bell tower of my hometown is better than yours. Because they use urbanism, architecture, art to celebrate the wellness of places, and they engage a cultural fighting, cultural battle, using the best artists of those days. And step by step, these arrived to the Renaissance, when they decided to do the same under the umbrella of a rediscovered classicism. So if we want to think about what is the community, what is the place is the city, and is the idea of the city that has been created in the 13th century, when they understood that it was important to do something that was no longer control under some dictatorship or something, some oligarchy, but something that was celebrating the community, where no distinction among the inhabitants was happening. The risk today is that some of those that are making classical traditional architecture are doing these things only for the wellness, for the wealthy people. But the great challenge is to do something that is affordable, is accessible to everybody, to go back on the celebration of the community and the place more than the individuals.
So Ettores' view, response is that, if I were to summarize it, would be the internet and social media and podcasts have been able to, over the last decade or more, open the door to discourse and discussion, especially within schools of thought, that help, diversify schools of thought and take a kind of conventional wisdom that's so pervasive that if you break that down, you can open the door to additional thinking. So
because there is no economical control of industry that used to control magazine, books, TV, etc., etc.
So it's opened the door to thinking about place in the way that we need to be thinking about place. At the same time, of course, we can see that if place, so I definitely have a view that place has to involve the concept of belonging, and place has to, and as you also mentioned, place has to involve total inclusiveness. There can be no exclusion and play together, right? So it has to have a sense of belonging, and it has to have universal inclusion.
Yeah.
And that's, in a way, if you define place that way, that's what, so where discourse can happen that's leading us to that's obviously constructive, where when social media is fragmenting, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this more, it's almost denying our ability to generate place.
Yeah. In my eyes, to answer Grant's question from a different perspective, there are two parallel evolutionary strains. On the one hand, as Ettore addressed, with new techniques, as always in history with new techniques and its inherent promise of optimization, we have the possibility to optimize some kind of dialogue about, amongst others, place and citizenship. Okay. On the other hand, the parallel development is for whom these new media are made and what is the underlying image of the human for whom these media have been primarily designed, and related to this image of the human, what is the underlying the profit interest. The major aim of this media is not to entertain. The major aim of this media is to make profits, which means it's a certain worldview, it's a certain system, and a certain image of the human, namely the human as user of the world, as a consumer. And this consumer, as an independent individual, as a perverted tradition from the Enlightenment period, so to say, is now living alone, more or less. Second, has the possibility via social media to attain communities ad libitum, as the individual wants. So today I'm the member of community A, and tomorrow I'm the member in community B, and this is not working. And this was this good example with the medieval Italian city-states. The first, after the downfall of the Greek city-states, the first real renaissance of the idea of the civis and the civitas on a, let's say, on a democratic basis. And interestingly, these Italian city-states have been the very first centers of a free market economy spreading out. So it is no accident that both coincided. Okay, now we have a completely different situation. We have, from the image of the human, we have individuals that are freely acting in consuming the world. The human being is a user, first of all, in the self-understanding. The identity is I am a more or less isolated individual. I'm a user of the world. And in fact, if I need communities as a social animal, maybe, then I can join some communities as I want. And all this force is enhanced by the social media means it's not a space. The social media, this is an abstract system of algorithms. It's a pure abstraction. This whole thing is more abstract than a Gothic cathedral construction. And in this space, as a new kind of, let's call it a public or communal space, which is no real space, because there are no real individuals, there's no real human interaction. But in this abstract space, being a system, a mathematical system, I can act as a user. And this is the new freedom. The new freedom is not the ethos of the citizenship. The new freedom is the freedom of using the world. This is the second strain of evolution. And this is colliding somehow.
Yeah, sometimes there is also the misunderstanding of the sense of the word freedom.
Yeah,
because it was, especially in the last century, these, especially in the US, probably more than the other places, this idea that freedom, because I'm free, I can do whatever I like, while your freedom is ending when it's invading mine. So something is to be free, something is to impose my freedom to the rest of the community. So there is always the needs of having some rules, which are the universal rules, and then the local and the individual that must be always in the respect of all the other. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to let people understanding the subtle difference between the freedom, a real word of freedom, real meaning of freedom, and what is made today.
Can I interject something? I mean, I'm definitely not of your level, that's for sure, but space, let's say that there's a belief that space and place today, you have three different spaces. You have the space, which is the physical space. You have the city, the building, the architectural construction, the park, so forth, the place where people go to entertain themselves within the structure of the city or the community. Then you have the second space, which is the self, which is a collective consciousness, which collective consciousness right now is going through a major transition to the effect that I really believe that we're going into a period of nihilism against the community and society. And I mean, I know there's positives with the internet and social media and such, but let's take this point of view that the social media also is a space. It's a community unto itself. It's a subculture unto itself. And although it has many positive things, at the same time, it's creating in the new generation of people, let's say, that are going to be the future of all of us, this whole concept of desiring and consumption, as Zolrich said. And basically, you have a consumer democracy, which it's not based on freedom, it's based on the concept of consumption, which that is the freedom, is I do. And then what happens is you have a young generation, let's say, following things where they see the most expensive cars, the most beautiful women. I want to have a nose job. I want to have beautiful breasts. I want to be a man with a great face. So they do surgeries at 17, 18 years old. They get Mercedes. They want this. And they have this desire in this space to be that. And then what happens is you have this reaction because they all of a sudden don't understand that they can attain that. So they isolate. And that isolation is, it could be the downfall of society and collective consciousness. So community could fail in the city.
I agree.
And in the midst of all that, I think is the question of contact, right? So if we're talking about space, different types of space, we're trying to get, tease out what we really mean when we say place, because we think the notion of place is like a linchpin here, right? Can you even have community, can you have community in a true sense without place? So it's about contact. And we think, okay, Facebook was designed to say, as an early starting point for us in social media, to say, oh, well, you can connect with all these people. And certainly if I'm like, if I have a friend who moved halfway around the world, now I can have that relationship continue in a way. In the past, it would have been a few phone calls here and there. So like Facebook is facilitating contact. But to your point, the future, if the future generations are losing, if their only form of contact is virtual, what is that impact on place and community? So we need.
Question: what becomes place then?
Well, it's
Non-place.
Well, that might be the definition of non-place. So yes.
Yeah, what you are describing at the end is what is generating some syndrome that is already existing, which is the hikikomori. So we really, as I said earlier, we are destroying the relationship, especially among the young people, which is the future, and is this, this famous phrase, divides et impera, which is really looks like the program of whoever is working. Now we don't know if it is something that is maybe intentional or not. But it's true that the society that we are living now is a society that is transforming the human as a social animal in something I define in an essay that is available online. in some kind of new mythological figure, I define the anthropolectus, half man, half sofa. Because apparently our greatest target is to become a parasite. We decide that the computers and robots are going to substitute the humans. The population is growing and the labor is reduced. So we don't know what is going to be the future of humans. And everything is presented in a super positive manner because they always say you are going to have more time for yourself. But you are going to have more time for yourself to be sitting on your sofa, drink some Coke with a machine, and then buying things from your cell phone. And so there is no longer any human relationship. And this is something that is tragic. So as I said earlier, est modus in rebus, because on one hand, the web can allow us to be open to things that have been hidden for other interests. On the other hand, is something that is giving the illusion of become a billionaire without doing anything. I'm not kidding, but in Milan, some online university has introduced, now it has been already 3-4 years, a university that is giving the graduation to become a influencer. This is crazy. Honestly, it's crazy. So we are doing everything to convince young generation that they can be parasite and billionaire for nothing. And this is something that has to be changed. So we in my opinion, since I can see the double blade of internet, I think, and the best way to solve a problem is always to understand what is the business and to become part of that business in order to use the same devices, the same weapons through internet. Let's say the wise people has to show the side effect, has to describe the side effects of what is happening. Obviously, we are constantly exposed to the so-called fact checker, which are trying to say, you are wrong, you are saying lies, and you are, making theory of conspiration and whatever. But it's the only way you can arrive to these people using the same system, because now we are also living in the so-called TikTok generation. Kids are really, the amount of dyslexia among the students is growing horribly. People are no longer able to write. There are systems that are making the grammar correction when you are typing, and people are no longer able to write. This is not the way of growing. We are claiming to live in the more advanced moment of the human beings, but in reality, if we draw, from the monkey, the person that is getting almost erectus and then etc., I don't know what is now the kind of figure to be drawn. Some stupid guy with the cell phone walking, and this is something that is drama.
I think this.
So I feel I should start the microphone. But yes, no, I mean, it's really interesting what you're saying. Just to sort of build upon and maybe give a couple of, I don't know if they're counter examples, but it reminds me some of the discussion of okay, so there's a well-known sort of critical philosopher called Slavoj Žižek, and then there's a critical theorist and follows him in America, Jody D. And they've written a lot, or certainly Jody D has written a lot on the internet and web culture. And it does sort of correspond to what's being said here. And she follows Žižek in using a term to describe some activity online, and the term is interpassivity. And it's a combination of interactive and being passive. And the basic argument is that when it comes to digital culture, digital media, what it's very good at is giving people the feeling of being interactive. So you can go online, you can do a blog, you can sign an e-petition, and you feel like you're being active. But in reality, you're being quite passive because obviously you're just going on your phone. And what you get is the feeling that your voice is contributing to a global debate and discussion. So I think it's quite an interesting term, interpassivity. But what particularly Jodie Dean argues is, yes, we don't want, and she's very critical of liberal thinking, liberal political philosophy. She claims that this idea that the internet can create many public spheres and create a sort of dialogue, a consensus among people is a bit of a fiction, because it can create this notion of interpassivity where people feel like they're being involved in politics, but they're not really. It's the technology that's being active on our behalf. But what she does say more positively is that the internet and the web isn't anything. She calls this a zero institution. It doesn't signify anything. Right? That means it is up for grabs. And she said, and so she's more in favor of what she says promoting agonistic debate, which is debate focused on looking at the divisions in society, not creating fictitious consensus amongst us all, which often hides inequalities, but creating divisions. She gives the example of the Occupy movement of 2011 that started in America and then spread all around the world, including the UK, where people use the internet to, talk about the 1% who govern, very powerful. And, we are the 99%. And we want to talk about divisions in society and inequalities. But also, one thing about Occupy is it brought together both public space and well-known public monuments of belonging and the internet and social media. And it built on things like the Arab Spring and all those types of movements, which really sought to reclaim public space, to say, look, we need a physical, visible presence and a sense of belonging, but also to use the internet and social media, digital media to promote, not to promote divisions, but to talk about divisions and to be not just antagonistic, but agonism is this notion of you promote debate, which isn't premised on consensus. It's a debate to say, look, this is what's going on and it isn't good. There are these gross divisions between people, but we can actually come together to push back against those, to push back against the 1%. And obviously Occupy came out of the 2008 global collapse and, governments pushing austerity into people. It's like, no, we're not having this. And so in a way, one could recognize this idea of the internet is causing problems, making people passive, but they think they're interactive. But at the same time, it does, because there's no ideology to it as such, although we do know it's owned and controlled by the rich. Although obviously the internet it was publicly funded. We've got to remember that the 1% rely on the public sector to always bail them out.
The will to be responsible for some results, to be committed over a longer period of time, as in this Arab Spring movement, for example. And to achieve this, when we are speaking about a community, place, and identity, and these different things, is very, very different and difficult. How to achieve identity in an age that long before the internet has been proposed and pushed forward, this consumer democracy. Hart said pseudo-democracy, and image of the human. I want to come back to this. Image of the human, this is primarily an isolated individual acting in the world. And the idea of a common good, of community, and of an active citizenship as a premise to achieve a common good and to admit a position of being responsible as a citizen for the outcome, for certain outcomes, this cannot prosper in a climate of a Menschenbild of this isolated individual consuming the world. We have been trained since the onset of modernity after industrialization, mass consumption, mass products, and now we have as a final evolutionary result the internet and the social media. But in its essence, it's the same tendency. It's a tendency of isolation and of fragmentation, and the result are fragmented societies. Okay, what we do, if we say, and this is an assumption, that despite these developments, that human beings still need a real place, a place belonging, that they still need real community. If this is all true, also if these assumptions are valid, and have not changed into a new kind of human being you describe, if not, how in the hell to achieve this?
Yes, please. And then we'll go back to you. Yeah.
Well, so far as we had the discussion, from my point of view, we seem to agree that internet and social media did not form what we formerly called the polis by now. And maybe the problem could be being connected at one time to everyone else on this planet, or in the end, the possibility to being connected without having any real exchange on the point, but just sending out missions or statements without receiving really or perceiving what is the opinion of the other, maybe one reason why it wouldn't work. So could it be that we face a problem of numbers? Meaning, what about if we refocus on a polis-sized and the Greek numbers polis-sized structure, meaning what's about the neighborhood? Could neighborhood be something that can replace the former polis, bring together people in the end, even in a physical way? And can this be combined with some, let's say, very local formats of social media, which really go to the point of this neighborhood, the topics that are owned by all of the inhabitants of, however big you define the term neighborhood in the end, of course. But can this be one approach to bring back what's the ethos of polis?
Mm-hmm. So I was gonna also suggest if we go from the abstract to the tangible, I think neighborhood gives us the opportunity to be tangible, because I think when we're talking about place, we're talking about active versus passive. We're talking about human connection. And we're talking about, sitting on the couch, and becoming one with a couch, or being the individual, operating autonomously. If we think about daily life and we just say, okay, we still have to eat for the time being. We still have to, take kids to school or whatever it might be. That suddenly puts us in space, tangible, physical space. And then it provokes the question of, okay, what is human contacts through that? What are we doing at that moment that's different than, say, feeling passive or feeling that sense of connection, but doing it in a passive, isolated moment? So how does daily life have a role to play in this? And if we take it at the neighborhood scale, walking out my door into the neighborhood, Ettore told us it's the city. The city is, is obviously going to be a huge part of this conversation over the next 2 days. When I walk out my door, how does that begin an active series of contacts that become critical to this whole question of place, of community, of identity?
Well, I enjoy very much the two last comments because are completely true. And now, as a designer, as a professor of urbanism, I can't avoid to talk about great examples we had not a long time ago that have been forgotten, especially after Second World War, when these extreme idea of consumerism, as I said earlier, has been brought to any aspect of our life. And the way the more vulnerable categories of people, which are the young people and the elder, have been completely forgotten, not only by the society, but even by the architects that are designing places. Yes, the neighborhood is the right place. And I always, in the second semester of my class in the University of Notre Dame, I'm bringing the students, since we are teaching, sorry if I make this parenthesis, since we are teaching classical, traditional urbanism and architecture, we have to explain the student that we are not talking about some dream or utopia that wants to recreate the Baroque or the Renaissance, but is to simply understand how in the past, up to a very recent past, the human was the system to measure everything, and everything was designed to all the needs. And if we think about the massive phenomenon of urbanization that happened in Rome after the unification, it was a city of 165,000 of inhabitants that in 60 years became a city of 1.2 million of inhabitants. But the quality of what was built was incredible, without any distinction between the social housing and other houses, because it was forbid to have a district only for the working class, because it was necessary to facilitate the fusion of social classes. But what is fantastic is to see the plan of all these blocks, of all these neighborhoods. And all these blocks are created with the courtyard buildings, since the urban designer forgot, because at the end they were making master plan just thinking at the profit. So it was the city, unfortunately, based on the grid. And it was a grid where, due to the value of land, it was no space for piazze, for gathering people. So the designer, we will talk about that much more in depth tomorrow, because there is a great example to be known. But the designer was saying, since the city doesn't have these spaces, we will create this space within the blocks. So they created shortcuts for the pedestrian passing through the courtyard. And in every plan of this courtyard is written Campo di Gioco, which means the playground for children. All this play, and I bring the students to Garbatella, for instance, which is one of these working class districts, where today the value of the apartment is like the one of historical center, even if they were built as a social housing. And they can see kids playing into the courtyard. The last fortunate kids are those that are living in this district, where those spaces were designed specifically for their needs. And next to that were the spaces designed for the elders to take care about the kids that were playing. So if we simply think at the importance of creating the city that is just for every kind of category, we can also solve the problem of internet in some way. Obviously not totally, but I can't forget that when I was asked to redesign the district Zen in Palermo, which is one of the worst district ever, that is called Zen, but means Zona Espansione Nord. It's not something mystical. It's Northern Expansion Zone. This is a district that is really the mafia tank. And I was interacting with the parish of the district, with the director of the school, and with the many parents of this family that are living in one of the most dangerous places ever. And I was asked to develop as much as possible sports activities to keep the kids away from the mafia tentacles. In the same way, if we design a city that is reserving part of the land for these kids, and then they can make whatever kind of game, whatever kind of they want to do, they have less time to become stupid in front of a Wii or a PlayStation, because they can have a real life and not a social life which is completely artificial. So as a designer, we have an incredible responsibility, because and not only as a designer, because this is something that has to be approached also at a political level, because I can't forget that in many condos, it has been forbidden that the kids are playing in the courtyard because they are noisy. So on one hand, they are lamenting that the kids are becoming stupid and are doing whatever. And on the other hand, they don't allow them to have a natural life. I grew up playing soccer in the middle of a street because in my hometown it was possible. This is no longer, but this is today is utopia. But it's not utopia if you think that the needs of replacing all the wrong buildings that have been realized after Second World War. Because if today COP26, 27, and 28 is imposing an agenda to make the building more efficient in terms of energy, and making this building efficient doesn't mean to put some code that is going to be replaced in 20 years, and it's something that is dangerous, it's something that is unsustainable, it's something that is putting on fire. We need to replace the building with a more durable material, with a more human urban structure. We can make some plan, a long-term plan to recompact the city, because the more we pave the planet, the more we create a problem. So in this long-term idea of reconfiguring our city, we need to understand that children, elders, disabled, whoever has to be the very center of the design to make some city that is more just for everybody.
And I would think that we talk about choosing design and the social area of children and so forth. But then I guess the conceptualization of neighborhood should therefore be a conceptualization that the individual feels comfortable within the framework of what that space is, and that affects the space that's in their mind. So all spaces get affected because there's a comfort zone, because it's also okay to have the structure of space, but all the things that are joined to that, like for instance, social services, hospitals, the ability to look after older people, schools for children, if they're not addressed within the space, then the neighborhood won't function.
I completely agree. Tomorrow, I don't want to anticipate it because it will be the subject of tomorrow. But I can just use one word, which is very popular today, but is horribly abused, which is participation.
Yes.
Many times, even classical traditional architects dislike to talk with the urban sociologists. I wrote in my books that the students, before passing the threshold of the School of Architecture, they have to study urban sociology, because that is a discipline that is studying the side effect of architects, which means that it is a prophylaxis, is a vaccination against lobotomy. So we can't forget these things, and the participatory program is the right way to do something that is satisfying all the consumers of the neighborhood.